I thought she was working late. Until I walked into that restaurant and saw her laughing with another man like I never existed. I didn't confront them. I planned something colder. Because sometimes karma doesn't shout, it arrives quietly in an envelope that ruins everything. Before I tell you what happened, make sure to like the video, share it, and subscribe. This one gets dark. I didn't notice the cracks at first. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to admit that the woman I loved was slowly slipping away from me. It started with little changes, small, almost harmless things that you brush off because you trust the person you're with. But trust, I've learned, is fragile. And once it weakens, every tiny shift starts feeling like a warning. I remember coming home one evening, tired but excited because I had picked up her favorite dessert on the way. I was planning a quiet night with her, nothing fancy, just the kind of simple comfort we used to enjoy. But when I walked in, she barely looked up from her phone. She gave me a half smile that didn't reach her eyes, said she had already eaten, and went straight to the shower. That moment sat strangely in my chest, like a small knot I couldn't untie. At first I told myself she was stressed. Work had been heavy for her lately. Overtime, new deadlines, extra shifts. I repeated these explanations to myself like a mantra, trying to calm the unease growing inside me. But then came the late replies, the hurried excuses, the constant checking of her phone, the way she'd angled the screen away from me, just slightly but enough for me to notice. Whenever I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile too quickly, like she had rehearsed the expression. She'd tell me I was overthinking. And for a while, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Because loving someone often means choosing faith over fear, even when your instincts are begging you to wake up. But the nights began to feel longer. The silence between us became heavier. I'd lie in bed next to her and feel like I was sharing a room with a stranger who knew exactly how to break me without ever raising her voice. I could sense she was somewhere else, mentally, emotionally, and eventually, physically. And that thought alone twisted inside me, sharp and painful, like betrayal waiting for its moment to strike. I didn't know it then, but the night that would change everything forever was already on its way. A night where karma wouldn't whisper, would hand-deliver the truth to her, in a way neither of us could have seen coming. The moment I realized something was truly wrong didn't come as a shock or some dramatic revelation. It came quietly, wrapped in the familiar scent of her clothes, except this time, that scent wasn't familiar at all. She walked past me one morning, rushing to grab her keys, and for a split second, I breathed in a perfume I had never smelled on her before. It wasn't her usual soft floral scent. This one was stronger, warmer, the kind someone wears when they want to be noticed. It clung to her sweater like a whisper she was hoping I wouldn't hear. I asked her about it, casually, trying not to sound like the jealousy inside me was waking up. She laughed it off and said a coworker hugged her. But her voice wavered just slightly. The way she avoided meeting my eyes, that was what tightened something in my chest. After that, I started noticing more things. Little inconsistencies that wouldn't matter if they weren't happening all together. She suddenly needed to work late 3 times a week. Her makeup, which she normally wore lightly, became more polished. Her tone when she talked to me shifted, still kind but distant, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. When I reached for her hand at night, she'd pull away unconsciously, turning to the other side as if sleep had chosen her over me. One evening, she left her phone on the couch while she went to the kitchen. It lit up with a notification, just a name I didn't recognize. I didn't touch it. I didn't even move closer. But something inside me cracked open. A quiet, aching truth began forming in the back of my mind. Someone else was entering her world. The worst part wasn't even suspicion. It was the way she acted when she realized she had left her phone behind. She rushed back instantly, almost panicked, grabbed it, and forced a smile that trembled at the edges. That expression alone told me more than any message ever could. Still, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I kept telling myself maybe I was imagining it all. Maybe I was the problem. But my heart wouldn't calm down. My instincts wouldn't let go. And every day, the distance between us grew like a quiet storm preparing to break. I just didn't know it was going to break in the most painful, unforgettable way possible. The night everything snapped into focus started like any other heavy, quiet and full of unanswered questions. She told me she'd be working late again, this time with a tone so practiced it almost sounded natural. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something about the way she grabbed her bag, avoided kissing me goodbye, and rushed out the door told a different story. A colder story. I sat in the living room for an hour, replaying every sign I had ignored, every strange scent, every late night, every distant look. And then, almost without thinking, I opened the food delivery app we both used. It was the only thing we still shared without hiding. I didn't expect to see anything. I just needed a distraction. But then, there it was. An order, placed not at her workplace, not at home, but at a restaurant across the city, one she always said was too loud, too bright, too public for her taste. My breath left me in a single painful rush. The timestamp was recent. She wasn't picking up takeout. She was staying, eating, sitting down with someone. My heartbeat hammered in my ears as I grabbed my keys. I didn't think, didn't plan, I simply drove. The city lights blurred in front of me, matching the confusion twisting in my stomach. I kept telling myself I might be wrong, that maybe she was with coworkers. Maybe this was nothing. Maybe I was about to embarrass myself with my own paranoia. But deep down, I already knew. When I reached the restaurant, I didn't walk in through the main doors. I stood by the window first, my hands shaking as I tried to steady myself. And then I saw her, Vela, sitting at a corner table, dressed beautifully, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. Leaning forward, laughing softly, not at her phone, not with coworkers, with him. A man I had never seen before. Sharp features, confident posture. It's a kind of presence that fills a room without trying. Oren, I didn't know his name yet, but his face burned itself into my memory. I felt something inside me break, not loudly, not violently, just a quiet, devastating shift. I should have stormed in. I should have confronted them. But instead, I stepped back into the shadows, my mind already forming something colder than anger. Because betrayal hurts, but the right revenge hurts a whole lot more. When I walked away from that restaurant window, I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I felt strangely calm, almost frozen, like my emotions had stepped aside to let something colder take over. Betrayal has a way of numbing you before it burns you, and in that numbness, I found clarity I didn't expect. I knew that storming in, yelling, or causing a scene wouldn't give me anything except more pain. I needed a different kind of response, one that matched the quiet, deliberate way she'd been tearing our relationship apart. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at the steering wheel, waiting for my heartbeat to slow. My hands were trembling, but not out of fear. Out of realization. She wasn't confused or lost or overwhelmed. She had made a choice, and I needed to make mine. I drove to the nearest convenience store and bought a blank envelope, a simple sheet of paper, and a cheap pen. My hands still shook as I parked under a dim streetlight and unfolded the paper. I kept imagining her laughing at that table, leaning into someone else, giving him the softness she had taken from me. Every memory cut deeper, but instead of shouting into the night, I let the pain pour into my handwriting. I didn't write threats. I didn't write curses. I wrote 8 short lines, sharp, undeniable. The kind of lines that don't start a fight, they end one. I reminded her of the night we promised honesty. I told her I knew where she was and who she was with. I told her I wouldn't be waiting when she came home. And at the bottom, I slipped in a photo on from our first anniversary, where she held my face like she couldn't imagine loving anyone else. It felt poetic, in a twisted way. When I finished, I sealed the envelope and drove back to the restaurant. I didn't go inside. I simply waited outside until a waiter stepped out for a smoke break. I walked up to him, handed him the envelope, and quietly said, "Give this to the woman in the silver dress when they're done eating. It'll make sense to her." He nodded, curious but unbothered. I handed him a tip big enough to make him take it seriously. Then I stepped back, leaned against my car, and breathed. Revenge doesn't always come in flames. Sometimes it arrives on paper. I didn't have to walk back into that restaurant to witness the fallout. I could see everything through the wide glass windows, like I was watching a movie I never asked to star in. The waiter I had spoken to walked toward their table with the envelope in his hand, casual and calm, unaware that he was carrying a grenade disguised as a message. Vela looked up at him, confused for a second, before she accepted it with a polite smile. She probably thought it was some restaurant promotion or a complimentary note. She always loved thoughtful gestures, even the smallest ones. Ironic, considering how carelessly she threw ours away. She opened the envelope slowly at first, then froze. I've never seen someone's expression shift so violently. Her smile faded, her eyes widened, and her entire posture collapsed inward, as if the truth had punched the air out of her. She covered her mouth with her hand, shaking her head, her breathing turning shallow. Orrin watched her, clueless, concerned, leaning closer as he asked her what was wrong. She tried to hide the letter. That's what stung the most. She still wanted to protect the lie even after being caught. But Orrin wasn't stupid. He reached across the table, pulled the letter from her hand, and started reading. His eyebrows tightened, his jaw clenched. And then the napkin he held dropped to the floor, like he had suddenly lost the strength to hold anything steady. He shot up from his chair so abruptly that half the restaurant turned their heads. His voice cut through the room, not a scream, but a sharp, furious crack. You didn't tell me you had a boyfriend? People stopped eating. Forks paused midair. Conversations died, mid-sentence. Vela stood up too, reaching for his arm, trying to explain, trying to salvage something that was already burning at her feet. But Orrin stepped back, his face twisted with disgust. He didn't yell again. He didn't have to. The disappointment in his eyes was louder than any argument. Slammed his palm on the table, not at her, but at the betrayal itself, and the sound echoed like a judgment delivered. A few customers gasped, others whispered. Someone pulled out their phone. Vela's voice cracked as she pleaded with him, but Orrin simply shook his head, grabbed his jacket, and walked out, rushing past me without realizing who I was. Inside, she crumbled. Outside, I watched karma do its work. I stayed where I was, leaning against my car, letting the cold night air settle into my chest. I didn't rush. I didn't hide. I wanted her to see me not out of spite, but because the truth deserved to stand in front of her with no shadows left to run into. And when she finally burst out of the restaurant doors, her eyes red and frantic, I knew she wasn't looking for him. She was looking for me. She spotted me almost instantly. Her steps faltered, like her body wasn't prepared for the reality of seeing the person she had tried so hard to deceive. For a second, she just stared completely still, like she hoped I was some illusion her guilt had created. But when I didn't disappear, she broke into a shaky walk, then a run, her voice already trembling as she called my name. Yalan, please wait. I didn't move. I just watched her come closer, watched her collapse in front of me emotionally before she even said a word. She reached for my arm, her hands trembling so badly I could feel the desperation radiating off her. Her makeup was smudged, her breathing uneven, her whole world clearly falling apart faster than she could gather the pieces. Please, she whispered. It's not what you think. I can explain. There's always an explanation when the truth shows up uninvited. Always a story, a reason, a sudden wave of regret that arrives too late to matter. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I just looked at her hand, saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. You chose him tonight, I said quietly. You didn't choose confusion or a mistake or a misunderstanding. You chose him. Her face crumpled. She shook her head violently, grabbing onto my sleeve like a drowning person reaching for something solid. No, Yalan, I messed up. I swear I didn't mean to hurt you. Please just listen. Please don't leave me. I gently pulled my arm away, not angrily, just firmly enough to let her know the line had already been crossed. I've listened for months, I told her. But you stopped speaking the truth a long time ago. Those words broke her. She sank to the pavement, knees hitting the cold ground, sobbing with a rawness that pulled at every part of me that once loved her. People stared from a distance, whispering, watching her fall apart. But I walked away slowly, silently, without looking back. Sometimes the hardest confrontations aren't battles, they're endings. In the days that followed, silence became the only language between us. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, that fills every corner of your home until it feels smaller, colder, almost unlivable. I didn't block her, but I didn't reply either. Every message she sent buzzed against my phone like a reminder of everything she'd chosen to throw away. Paragraphs of apologies, rambling explanations, late-night voice notes where she cried harder with each attempt. I listened to none of them. It wasn't revenge. It was closure. What she didn't expect was what happened next. Karma turning its attention toward her life outside our relationship. Oren wasn't the kind of man who tolerated lies. After that night at the restaurant, he made sure she understood that clearly. I didn't know the details at first, but word travels fast when someone's world collapses publicly. From what I later heard, Oren confronted her again this time in a way she couldn't escape from. He called her out in front of her coworkers, asked her why she played them both, why she pretended to be single, why she thought two hearts were disposable. She tried to defend herself, tried to turn the story into something softer, something less ugly. But lies don't survive long when the truth is standing right there, staring back at you with disappointment. He walked away from her for good. No second chances, no drawn-out conversations. It's just a clean, brutal ending. And suddenly, the man she betrayed me for was gone just as quickly as he appeared. That's the thing about affairs. They're not built for real life. They're built for shadows, secrets, stolen moments that fall apart the second they're exposed to daylight. She came to my apartment once, stood outside the door for almost an hour. I knew she was there because I could hear her muffled sobs. She kept repeating my name, apologizing again and again. Like repetition could rewind time or erase the image of her laughing with him. But I didn't open the door. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I wasn't the same man who walked into that relationship trusting her with everything. Something in me had shifted, maybe cracked, maybe healed in a different shape. The irony? Trying to choose a new option, she ended up losing both. The lie she protected so carefully took everything from her, leaving her with the one thing she couldn't escape, the weight of her own choices. And that, more than anything I could have done, was the real karma. Healing didn't come to me like some dramatic revelation or a sudden moment of clarity. It came quietly, almost unnoticed at first, like the way sunrise sneaks over the horizon without asking if you're ready for a new day. After everything collapsed, after the messages stopped, and the knocking at my door faded into memory, I found myself sitting alone in the same spaces where we used to laugh, realizing they no longer hurt the way they once did. I spent a lot of nights wondering if I had failed her, or if I had failed myself. Heartbreak has a way of twisting guilt into strange shapes. The more I sat with that pain, the more I understood something simple. Peace doesn't grow in the same soil where betrayal takes root. You have to walk away from the ruins if you ever want to see anything bloom again. So I started small. Morning walks, cooking for myself again, rearranging furniture that held too many memories. I deleted old photos, not out of anger, but out of acceptance. I didn't want to cling to fragments of a story that had already written its final chapter. Every small step felt like sweeping dust out of my chest, making room for something lighter. Friends reached out. My brother dragged me to the gym more times than I wanted to go. My coworkers started noticing that the tension in my face had softened. Even strangers began to feel less like background noise and more like reminders that the world was still wide, still moving, still open to anyone willing to step back into it. One morning, months later, I caught my reflection in a shop window and realized I looked different. Not broken, not bitter, just calmer, stronger, like someone who had been cracked open, but had healed with a thicker layer beneath the skin. And the strangest part? I didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hate is just another chain that binds you to what hurt you. I let that go quietly, the same way she had let go of us, only this time. The release brought freedom, not destruction. I realized that the real victory wasn't in the revenge or even in karma doing its part. The real victory was walking forward without carrying the weight of what she had done. The real victory was reclaiming myself. Pain had its time, but peace finally had its turn.